Welcome to the Digital Double Down Business Advantage podcast series with your leading digital authorities, AliNICOLE WOW, and that is me, and also King Rob Deptford. And once again, we are back and excited to share more with you as we help you digitally double down and level up for your business advantage. So, Rob, as always, it's great to be with you and share the space.
Yeah, another good episode I'm sure we'll come up with here. We never plan these things, right? So
No, that's right. And that's the beautiful thing, or I should say the magical thing about being able to step in the space and start to have an organic conversation. Of course, our core agenda is to help entrepreneurs and business owners be able to do the double down in the digital space to level up for their higher advantage, for sure. So we know that's the core objective. But right, we don't have like a specific focus. We just kind of allow it to happen. So yeah, let's do that. Let's let's allow the space to kind of provide prompts and triggers of the value that we will be able to provide for the listeners, for sure. So
yeah, before we started recording, I said I went to fill up my coffee cup, and I think this is kind of like how it works. It's like coffee talk.
it is. It very much is. And it's interesting. You always bring up triggers of things I have either platforms or trainings around, So I'll include some information in the description. And of course, before we close out this segment, we will reference a few platforms and also, if there are things that come up and I know that we have something to provide as it relates to topics that we talk about, then I'll certainly, include those as well. But so let's jump off in terms of talking about, kind of having coffee talk conversations and how that can really be to the advantage of a business owner, an entrepreneur for sure. I remember early on when I was doing virtual coffee connection calls and also what I would call conscious connection calls. And that's when you primarily were meeting with people for the first time that you hadn't, you never engaged them in that way. And you met someone on social media and then you decided to connect. And so being able to do even virtual coffee connect calls like that are really good, for business. But certainly if you can have just organic conversations with individuals and kind of wrap it around or even create products where you're doing, coffee talk types of products where even with like lunch and learns, you can actually do sort of model that structure or that format in doing some presentations. And that's something else, Rob, that takes really the intimidation out of individuals having to show up, whether it's presentations they want to do or make connections without feeling like they have to be so buttoned down and polished. It can really just let it be a natural progression. Your thoughts around that?
Well, I think that's the way to do it.
Mhm.
There's a time and a place for the more formalized stuff
Absolutely.
for sure,
Absolutely.
but when you're especially for smaller groups, I think
Hmm. Hmm.
in more cozy environments, let's call it.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
just, I think to me, it makes sense to have these more conversational style
Yeah. Mhm.
delivery of trainings or whatever the content
Mhm.
happens to be. And I've had that too over the years where I've been at in-person events,
Mhm.
and the plan was to be for a more formalized delivery of a presentation of some
Yeah.
kind.
Mhm.
And then, but we never knew, at conferences and things where they have these concurrent sessions and such, you
Yeah.
never know who's going to turn up to your session, because if you're up against Tony Robbins in the
Mhm.
next room, you're probably not going to have anybody, right? So
Right.
so that happens sometimes, and I've had that where I'll get a smaller number than expected in the room, and
Mhm.
then you just turn it into a more conversational style. So
Absolutely.
it
And
works really well.
it does. And that is the best way to actually do trainings and really presentations of any sort, is because it is very much a natural flow. And I find, and that's why, I coined myself early on as being the authority of conversational training, because it was a style that I started to bring out more in the marketplace and encourage other people to be able to leverage that. Because what I found over the years is that people actually most of the time remember more from conversations than they do lectures and different presentations or so. And so when I saw that and I started marrying that with the educational piece, too, even in my homeschooling and different things that I do in the educational system, is being able to have those conversations where you're not talking so much at people, you're talking with them, even if you don't have someone, let's say, with you per se, but when you can do it in that conversational way, it does make people feel like they're more engaged. And so that's even kind of, I won't say one of the core objectives of what we're doing here, but we do want people to actually feel like, they are a part of what we're doing, and we're really having a conversation together, obviously, but really with them too.
Yeah, that's the idea, is draw them in and make it feel engaging.
Hmm.
And so much the better if there's an opportunity to engage. A lot of the digital platforms these days allow for feedback as you go, comments on the fly. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
especially if you're doing a live stream, that's pretty much a
Hmm.
given now. So lots of options for that engagement piece. And again, yeah, get people involved.
Oh, absolutely. Because that's the key, because in a few of my teachings where I talk about you have to, communicate and connect and convert and close, and then you have the currency factor. And of course, we're talking about business here. So it is about the impact and the income. And actually, I kind of feel we need to talk about that in prioritizing profits as it relates to the business aspect. But being able to have the conversations to make the connections and to have the right types of engagement, you can get that on so many different levels, and you want to be able to have kind of that multifold kind of I guess response to it, where there is the impact, and the income aspect. But in order to even get to an income aspect, there first has to be a connection factor, which is going to come via your communication, whether it's the marketing communications or so. A conversation is happening regardless, whether written format or verbal format. Would you agree?
Yeah, either way, absolutely.
Yeah, either way, but it transfers across the board. So since I kind of brought that up, let's go there for a moment, um, because the conversations, even in coffee talk or however, are more than just like what we're doing here. It does translate to what you type on social media, what you put in your articles, your copy, everything. Are you being conversational in that manner? Are you engaging people where you are prompting them to have a conversation with you? And then maybe it does lead to something else. So let's say that you aren't doing a live stream, or you're not on YouTube doing something, and you just have a blog post, or you do put up a social media post. Are you making it conversational, where it is kind of a call and response, that is just not a post? Are you asking questions? And these are important because again, we're talking about areas that you need to, and we're inviting you, so to speak, to consider doing a double down in the digital space, because all of it is important and to the advantage. Rob, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the more conversational it is, the more you are going to get people interested in continuing to listen or read or whatever the format is.
Hmm.
These are not academic papers you're
Right,
writing.
exactly.
It's you're trying to appeal to a certain audience,
Hmm.
and in order to do that, it has to be. I mean, you have to have a hook off the top, of course, but then you
Hmm.
have to keep people in it. There's got to be something that continually keeps people engaged in that, whatever that content is.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's the way to go, is to think about how would you tell the story in conversation,
Hmm.
and whether you're doing it like this on a podcast episode, or writing a social media post or whatever it is, that really is an effective way to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind, I love it. I love what you said, what you shared. And going back to the coffee aspect of having kind of a coffee talk is, are you engaging enough and interesting enough that someone would say, "Oh, I would like to actually sit down and have coffee with you." See,
Yeah,
those are the things you have to think about, right? Right, Rob?
yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, would it be interesting enough for my audience
Mm-hmm.
that somebody would be interested in having coffee with me to
Right.
hear the story.
Yeah, exactly. Right, right. And so again, we're talking about being able to do the double down in terms of what is going to help you with access, in a sense, your higher business advantage. And when I say access, because there's different points, different levels that you access your potential, different levels that you access even your audience to engage. So there's different entry points and things that you have to really consider this. And it doesn't have to be something that is very complex. It can really be simple. And that's why being able to do just conversations, things that are just really natural and organic, it doesn't make you feel like you're coming off salesy. You don't feel like you're salesy, or even like you're trying to inundate people to kind of see your perspective. It's just that it's the meeting of minds, I believe, and then having kind of a conversation around it. You meet with the mind of your audience. They get to have a piece of your mind. It's like, hey, is there interest both ways? Because here's something else I want to say to business owners. There are a few audiences out there that you don't need to be interesting to. So
well, that's a fact. Yeah.
Right. So that's why we have the whole concept around target markets, right? And target marketing. And sure, can other people who maybe not fit into that profile, so to speak, come into your world and benefit? Absolutely. But then there are certain ones that you're definitely not trying to be appealing to them, and that's okay. And Rob's brought this up in other episodes in terms of, we aren't for everyone, right?
We're not for everyone.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be. We shouldn't be, right?
No.
Sure, there's some products and services out there that go for mass appeal, and the big giant corporate multinational conglomerates like Coca-Cola and Disney,
Right.
McDonald's, and those guys. Yeah, they're trying to get that broad appeal, but most of us are not playing that game. So we should have an idea of who is our target audience. What are their behaviors typically, and what are some of the things that they like that we could talk about and meet them on that level with?
Oh, absolutely. You have to be able to know the psychology and anthropology, just like how we look at demographics, right? You have to look at all of that, but still not so much in a left brain, type of way. It's just allowing those formats to come in a very natural, organic way. So just like when you are with individuals and you're having a conversation, that's also an opportunity to be a journalist, to be an observer, to be an explorer, and then to be able to take and gather some information and then bring it back to make it public friendly, so to speak, or whether that's through a product, whatever format. But you're present with the process, so that you're not just there, oh, I'm doing this as a journalist, so to speak. No, it's just kind of a natural thing. So when you're having a conversation, you can be in that mode of, it's an organic conversation, but you can have a little bit of the journalism effect with it, especially when you come away from it. And both Rob and I have a background in journalism and media communications. And so we understand kind of that process and format. But even for someone that doesn't have any type of formal training, which is not really required, is what we're talking about. You just want to be an observer of that, so that you can kind of take in, be present, but take in and then be able to bring something back that can serve people at the highest level.
Yeah. And, as a journalist, we do the research to come up with some of the facts and figures to be able to inject into these conversations. But as an expert in any industry, you're already going to know that stuff. So if you're talking on your area of expertise, maybe you're a plumber and you're doing a podcast episode, and there you get on to something about bathroom renos or something like that. You probably got a story about some toilet disaster that you had somewhere along the way in your plumbing adventures, right? And you knew what the problem was after investigating, and you figured out how to solve that problem. So those are the things that people get curious about and decide that, oh yeah, I'm going to tune into that. If they are in the plumbing audience, so to speak, maybe you're speaking to other plumbers, or maybe you're speaking to people who are doing home renovations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And all of it is vitally important. And these are areas to really to double down in, for sure. And I do want to go back to even what I was talking about and bring it home with what you were just saying in terms of even being kind of the journalist. And as you mentioned about doing the research and we do the gathering, and even as experts, we can be experts and authorities in our field, of course, and being able to share our knowledge and what we do. But because we are always too continuing to grow and evolve, that's why I brought up even at times being the journalist too, because let's say that you're in a live stream, or let's say you are having a conversation with someone and you can actually help them. But we still, even though we have our knowledge and expertise, there could be something, some element that they're bringing that we can actually expand or expound more upon by actually listening to the individual and observing, because it could hit our expertise at a different level that maybe we haven't considered sharing something in a certain type of way. So that's something too for experts, to realize that though we may have our expertise, we don't ever also need to be just in a default in what we know, always open to explore and expand, because the minute that you cap out on that, you're already going to be at a disadvantage. So it's always an advantage to be able to, continue the growth. That's why we're providing, what we're providing, right, Rob?
Well, this is it, right? And I think people forget sometimes that, the overarching umbrella here is really about branding. And if you're a plumber, well, you might also be a skydiver, and you might
Absolutely.
also have a dog at home, and you might also like to go mountain biking. And there are all these other parts of life that we experience
And
that,
that's what people engage in. They connect
yeah.
because people are this is something I teach in my YouTube, higher YouTube program, is that, people are multi-interest people. And so this is around being like a multi-niche, type of channel. People are multi-interest people. So you want to be able to engage people at different levels. So someone who they are generally about business, of course, and maybe we think, well, we need to target them because they're a business owner. But also if they have pets or so, you can actually use a life story, just like what you're talking about, or something else, and still make a connection to a business owner or someone in your target market with non-linear marketing, in terms of just being natural and organic. That's how conversations start. You can be in the park somewhere and walking your dog, and someone else has a dog, and next thing you know, because the commonality of where you met for a dog park or however, then next thing you know, this person is in business, or maybe they need something from you. So it kind of goes back to this being ready, right? It's got to be the core theme, right, Rob?
It's being ready, and it's being ready for the invitation, and
Absolutely.
not being like the old style is push, not pull, right? So it doesn't go, you're at the dog park and you're talking about, the different dogs and what you do with your dogs and those, and it doesn't go from that to, hey, I'd really like to install a new kitchen faucet for
Right,
you.
right, right.
You wait
Here's my
until,
business card here.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't work that way. It
Yeah,
really is about the trust factor, and it's a
yeah.
longer game than that. So it's building the relationships, and then, oh, by the way, hey, I met this person at the dog park a while back who happens
Mhm,
to be a plumber, right? And the
mhm.
conversations happen that way, and that's how business develops over time.
Oh, absolutely. And also too, I love what you said. I'm going to play the devil's advocate just a little bit. Quickly.
Yeah,
Well, not really. Actually, it's not, because it's we understand the process of business, and that's why you mentioned about the long game. But also being able to be prepared for the things that can instantly happen too. So just like what Rob was talking about in terms of you could run into somebody and they are a plumber, and let's say that you actually needed a plumber, or you were looking for that, and then you had what I call these divine rendezvous, in the sense where you happen to run into someone, and then they actually can supply what you need right then, or what you've been looking for, and then it actually does become some type of kind of instant engagement, instant interaction to engagement to, I guess, a transaction, so to speak, because if you met them and maybe you didn't take the time to get to know them a certain way, but because, they had a business card and you felt comfortable enough to know that, okay, I don't necessarily have to go the long route with this person. I'll go and explore their website, and just like what you would do if you called a company and you asked them to come over, whether it's to fix the internet or something, you don't necessarily know that person, so to speak, but you go and you do what? You look at the company, right? And you maybe look at some reviews or so you do some exploring. And the minute that you see, okay, I feel I can trust this individual or this company, then you go ahead and you make the call. And so that didn't take like a long process. So you have to be ready for those types of business transactions too, because I like to think of it in a lot of cases that sometimes, you are the answer to someone's prayer that they've been waiting on you. And the minute you show up, and then they know, okay, I've already been waiting on this because I've done tons of research. I couldn't find anyone, or the people I did find, it just didn't seem to connect or whatever. And then they find you, and then they are able to look at your brand or however, and then no, I'm ready to do this and to be able to do that. So those are things that can happen, in kind of a quick, kind of in a quick sense. So I think what it is, Rob, we just have to be prepared, of course, always for what can happen now and what will be the nurturing aspects too, where there is the relationship development. And of course, social media is like that, right?
Yeah. It is. It is. And in those cases where it happens quickly, the need is established already.
It
So
is, right.
you're already you meet at the dog park, right? And you're
Mhm.
talking dogs, and oh, by the way, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a plumber. Oh, my kitchen faucet's acting up. That's
Exactly, right, right, right.
so the conversation then begins to unfold. And so it's
Mhm.
not the, hey, I'd like to bring you a kitchen faucet that I don't necessarily know that you need.
Right, exactly, right, right, right.
So the need is established already, and that does happen. It
Oh,
can happen quickly,
mhm.
and you can offer your services and make or break your reputation very quickly. So, if you
You're
get invited
absolutely
in, then you
right.
want to do a good job.
You're right. And being prepared to do that, and to show up in whatever ways that you need to, but being able to be kind of just very organic with it. And so, before we wrap up, I definitely want to touch on the impact and income aspect, but I want to go back to talking about the conversations, because, and you've probably heard me share this story a couple of times, where I've had conversations with people that, I just literally had a conversation with them, just like a natural connection call. And because of the level of the conversation, I've had people, and it hasn't been many times that, I can count on one hand. Maybe it's happened four, no, I can't say it's happened more than 5 times in this way, where I have literally had people to pay me for that conversation. And then it challenged me over the years to actually minimize the conversations I was having with people, because of the level of the conversation that would happen. And then I started actually creating a product and kind of a program around being able to charge even just for conversations. And of course, you have to get to a certain level where you can, be able to do that. I'm not by any means recommending anybody to do that, especially if you don't have the experience. It's just, it was my experience is that people would say, there's no way this conversation, because what it's going to do and where it's going to take me, I need to pay you for this conversation. And for me, it wasn't necessary that they did that. But I had to level my game up too, and just say, well, okay, don't stare the gift horse in the mouth either, and not, because they're trying to value and honor you, then you don't need to shut that down, even though that definitely is not the intent, by no means. But my point in saying that is you have to be ready for any and everything, because things
Yeah.
can happen. And then those people then do say, hey, but I would like to continue to do something, with you or so. Or it's been times where there've been conversations will come up, and some books of mine or so will come, and then I'll show them a book or two on Amazon, and then, or a platform where I have some, and then they'll automatically ask me, are there any more that you would recommend? do you have something for this category too? You know, and so my point in sharing this is that being able to be ready, whether it's with offers, opportunities, it's just no, when those things are happening, I have zero of that in my mind ever, Rob, ever. King
Yep.
Rob, never. There's never one time I'm coming, oh, this is going to happen. And as many times as I've had different occurrences like that happen, I never think that, oh, this is just like an automatic. It didn't even cross my mind. It's not until it's actually happening. It's like, oh, snap, this is happening again. And that's like later, you know.
Yeah.
But my point in sharing that is that you have to be able to be ready. And sometimes there are going to be conversations. You have to value the level of conversations that you have, and know that what you do bring to the table is definitely, you know, worth being paid for. But you don't necessarily have to be intentionally about being paid for that. Like I said, my experience was that it challenged me to say, no, I actually do need to create the space for that, to take place. So let's talk quickly before we close up about prioritizing impact and income, because this is definitely an area where entrepreneurs need to really double down. We're talking about the digital space here, where there's the sea of sameness of a lot of different brands, and if you want to say that it's a competition out there, you can call it that. So with that, even though you may be on social media and you are sharing your value, but you also want to make sure that you are having a combination in terms of how you're showing up with posting and being able to make offers to people. But I call it's inviting them into an opportunity of what I call my social media casino effect. In a sense, it's like helping people to bet on themselves by investing in themselves. And so that goes back to the conversation too, is being able to be conversational with people and appealing to their best self, and not in a sleazy way. When I say appealing to their best self, that means that your best self needs to be the one that's doing that for them. But you have to set up the win-win. If you don't have profits as a priority in your business, then I'm sorry, you're not in business.
Well, that's it. Exactly. Yeah. You're then running a charitable organization, I think is what it's called.
Absolutely. And so then when you aren't receiving divine right compensation because you're showing up in a nonprofit, type of way. And trust me, I've had to have my behind stung many times in that occasion, because I'm a very benevolent individual. And so I definitely can be, I don't say like an overgiver in a sense, but definitely have had to have the checks and balances in that way, because whatever they don't perceive you in that way. You have these ones who do, because they know, let me pay you for this. But then you have some where it's like, no, they're because you're a giver, you're benevolent or whatever. So they're putting you in that nonprofit type of box, and not really seeing the value or understanding the experience. So my point in bringing this up is that when we're talking about being in business, you can be benevolent without being somebody's bee in the process. Okay. So sometimes you have to be very candid and open about that. And when I said open about that, not necessarily on social media, you're broadcasting that type of you're not putting that out there in that way, but you do have to be intentional. So being able to be to prioritize the profits is, yes, you post on social media, but how much combination do you have in terms of also leading people in to make some type of investment? That's an area to double down in. Is you need to look at, what are my impact and income goals, and are my habits and behaviors matching up with what I'm putting out here, and how I'm showing up. Am I being intentional about inviting people into some type of opportunity that is going to be divine right value exchange? It is a hard conversation. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, but it seems to be a hard conversation that most entrepreneurs don't want to have, because they don't want to come off a certain way. And honestly, it's a little bit in, and I'm going to say it. You all don't hate Rob for this. Just beat me up if you're mad about it. Because it may sting you, but you'll be all right after the swelling goes down. So the thing about it is a little bit insane if you don't have some expectation to make profits in business, even in how you're showing up. You just have to be able to leverage it. And what we've been talking about, even through this whole series, is about being prepared, being ready, and double downing in the right ways. And sometimes you need to digitally double down in your value and the worth. And you have to be concerned about, yes, your audience, but you also have to be concerned about yourself. You have families to feed, you have contributions to make to this world. And so you have to make a living. So you do have to have that divine right balance, and not feel that you should not be able to put yourself out there, in that way. So that's for somebody. Maybe it's not for everybody at this time. But if you're in business, it's really for anybody and everybody at any time. But who's ever ready to receive that? So that's the hard truth to double down on. So King Rob, your your thoughts around that before we close?
Well, I mean, we could have a whole other conversation around price psychology, but I mean, at the end of the
Yes.
day, free equals no value in a lot of people's minds.
Oh, right,
So,
right.
price yourself accordingly. And it's funny, I on my podcast consulting site, my Bizcastly site, I've got a podcast guide. And when we first put it up there, we priced it at $8.97, and it never sold. Just last week, as we're recording this, we put the price up to $19.97, and one
Yes.
sold.
Exactly. Exactly. Because right.
So,
And that's about the higher end advantage. Okay.
yeah.
So that's the thing, is that when you go too low, or you don't really put yourself out there a certain way. And when I say put yourself out there, not necessarily that you have to put it like, oh, here's this. It's being able to have the presentation and to be ready for that. Yeah, when you undervalue yourself, you underprice yourself, then you can expect that you're not going to get the response. You have to be able to do things accordingly, and to be able to position yourself. And so being able to prioritize those profits is vital, right? Right.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got to make a living, and we do have to understand what our value is to our audience. And it's easy, lots of people talk about imposter syndrome and those kinds of things. It's easy to undervalue ourselves. So I think we really have to get some feedback from those who we serve to really get a good sense of what is the value we're providing.
Indeed. And you're right. We could spend like a whole nother segment, around this, for sure. But this was definitely important, because that's the area to double down in, is to be able to value yourself, for sure. All of what we've been talking about, of course, is vitally important. But that definitely, the impact and income, the profitability aspect, you definitely have to be able to do that, because otherwise, again, why be in business? And what's going to be to your higher advantage? And sometimes you're going to hear things that maybe sting you, but is exactly, what you need to get yourself, to the next level, for sure. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this particular segment up. And of course, this has been great. King Robert, is always phenomenal to have these conversations with you. Like, we never know where it's going to go, but we know value will be shared.
I like the direction this one went. This was a good conversation. So.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Well, they all are, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. This one was more expansive, for sure. So we've got about a minute here. Would you like to give one wrap up word or so, then we close out?
Well, I think probably the underlying theme here is one is don't undervalue yourself, because when you do, people see that and they don't want to provide that value in return, or pay for that value. And then the other thing is, it really is your brand really is more expansive than you think. It's bigger than just your business or your product or your service. It
Mhm.
can be all kinds of different things that you're involved in that might be relatable to somebody else.
Right.
So don't discount the dog ownership or the skydiving or the
That's it.
skiing or the other things that you do in life, because those are ways to connect with people.
They absolutely are. Fabulous. Let your conversation, since we started off with that too, your coffee talk conversations or however, let those be able to lead you to connections that can lead to cash flow for sure. Again, because we're talking about being in business. This is what this
Exactly.
podcast is about, is business and your higher advantage. So we look forward to bringing you more, and we'll be back with you soon. Take care.